Hi, I'm Jimmy Butler, and welcome to the Agile Digest, where we have right-sized topics covered in just minutes. Today's topic is common user story mistakes. It's about 5 minutes. Enjoy. So this time we're going to talk about common user story mistakes. Let's do a quick user story recap. For basics on the recap, you can see the digest titled Writing Agile User Stories. But in short, again, the most common format is as a type of user, I want some functionality so that some purpose can be met. So we're going to cover the who, the what, and the why. And the goal here with a user story is that you have an independent piece of functionality that can be deployed and useful on its own for a specific type of user. A user story that starts as a user is a very common user story writing mistake. So for example, as a user, I want to be able to apply for financial assistance so that I can expedite my disaster recovery efforts. Well, isn't everyone who uses the system a user? And so what we want to get at with a user story is to define the kind of user, what type of user specifically, because a different role will have different needs and different reasons. For example, as an individual or as a business owner or as a community leader, they would all have different reasons and needs that need to be specifically defined in independent stories and delivered independently. So we look at things from the perspective of a type of user, a persona we call it. And so when we think about, does a story that starts as a user meet the goal of an independent piece of functionality that can be deployed and useful on its own for a specific type of user? Well, the answer is no. Another mistake is to write a story as a product owner. So as a product owner, I want the system to do this, or as a product owner, I want the team to explore this. And doesn't the product owner want everything done? And so again, it's not about the type of user using the system when you write a story this way. And the product owner is not the one experiencing the functionality. So again, we got to go back to what's the end user's perspective? What's the type of user using it? And to explore and research, not really a user story. I mean, it can be a spike story, but it's not really a user story from a user's perspective. And so it does not meet the goal of an independent piece of functionality that can be deployed and useful on its own for a specific type of user. As a developer is another very common mistake with user stories, very similar to the product owner mistake, where as a product owner, I want all these things. Well, as a developer, I need to do all these things. Well, we're not really talking about the specific type of user and what they want and why they want it when we write stories this way. So what we're really doing when we write an as a developer story is we're defining a task they need to do, which probably belongs underneath of a functional story. And sometimes we'll write user stories that leave off the so that or the why, right? So as a site admin, I want to be able to manage accounts. Well, that's great, but why do you want to be able to manage accounts? The why piece is very important so that we can get more specific on what we're trying to deliver. It's a legitimate story in the sense that it's a legitimate user with a legitimate need. Now that need gets into another digest we have about splitting user stories and some of the common splitting patterns there are, because chances are within managed accounts, there's a lot of things we could break out and do independently. So as a goal of independent piece of functionality that can be deployed and useful on its own for a specific type of user, we fall a little bit short because we probably aren't going to be able to know what managed accounts means without splitting, and without the why, we're not going to be able to narrow that down either. Teams newer to Agile will fall into the trap of doing technical splits versus thinking about vertical slices. We got to remember what the goal is for a user story. It's to deliver an independent piece of functionality that can be deployed and useful, right? So right away. So in order for it to be useful, if as a website customer I want to be able to pay with credit card, I need that slice of cake that has the web interface, the middle layer for the processing and the transmission. I need that data layer to handle the storage. All those have to go out together as a vertical slice in order for that capability to work. What teams sometimes get in the trap of doing is they'll say, well, I'm going to do a user story to create the user interface, the forms, or I'm going to do a story to do that payment processing or that transaction. I'm going to do a story to write it to a database. Well, those stories independently on their own can't be deployed and they're not useful. So technical splits are something that teams newer to Agile have trouble with, but we got to think in terms of vertical slices, end-to-end capability. So in summary, first understand who your specific user is. What's the persona? And before you start a project, before you get into things, you really need to understand who those different users are, those types of users. Clearly state the who, the what, and the why in your story so you understand the full context of what you're after. And then always think, does this story on its own deliver end-to-end functionality? Can I deploy it and can it be used right away from UI all the way through data layer? And writing good user stories is just about practice. Practice, practice, practice. Continue to look at them with your team and understand how you can write them better, and over time you will. Well, that concludes this digest. I always welcome your feedback, so please email me at the email address on the screen. Thank you.